In this video I'm going to show you how I make a wet palette for painting. All it is an empty Tupperware box with the sides cut down, with some paper towels stuffed into it. And you don't have to use new paper towels every time you paint. I've only changed those out twice in a year. And then a piece of greaseproof paper on top of it. I've used a couple of different types of greaseproof paper. I really didn't see any difference between the two types I tried. Worked fine with either. Here I'm wetting out the paper towels. You want to get them nice and wet. So I basically just fill the tub up with water and then pour most of it away so they're nice and sopping wet. If they're too dry, this won't work. Next up, I take my piece of baking sheet, greaseproof paper, whatever you want to call it, and saturate it, make it wet. The reason why we're doing that is we want the saturated baking sheet to make a good seal with the underlying paper towels. If they're sealed and stuck together, it'll act like a wick and it'll let water get sucked up out of the paper towels and keep the palette damp, which stops our paint from drying out. That's the goal. So here I'm taking a paper towel and I'm using it to just rub the baking sheet down and make sure I've got that good seal and everything's nice and wet. Another quick tip here is, if it is too dry or it starts to dry out in the middle of a painting session because your lights are hot or whatever, you can use a pipette and inject a little bit more water underneath the baking sheet and it'll bring that wet palette back to life. Alright, here we're mixing up a basic flesh colour from some primaries. So I've got white, red, yellow, green and dark brown. So starting with white, then I add a tiny amount of red, about twice as much yellow as red, otherwise it'll go very pink. A minuscule dot of green. The green just warms it up a little bit, does something magical to flesh. So there I've got a basic tone that I could start with for painting flesh. So what I'm going to do now is make a shadow colour. So I'm just putting some brown in that. And the brown will take it down to a slightly darker colour. The more brown I add, I'll make new shades as I add more brown to it. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I can do the same thing by adding white to the original flesh mix. And I can go up through a series of ascending tones to get highlights. And obviously I can use pure white for the highest highlights, and I can use that chocolate brown as a wash to shade the model as well. One extra quick tip, I'm always knocking contrast paints over, and what I figured out was actually if I just use a pipette and put it into a little palette well like this, I can't knock that over, and it's easy to use. It's a little bit wasteful, but it's less wasteful than spilling a whole pot of that stuff over my desk. Anyway, hope you found this useful, and I hope you get some painting done. Bye.